So over the last 7 years, I have done everything I possibly can to become a better filmmaker. I've listened to tons of interviews with professional filmmakers, far greater than me. I have obviously gotten out there, made some films, learned from my mistakes, and I've just watched a ton of videos and content about filmmaking. So my goal is, after watching this video, you will have saved 7 years. Instead of having to make all the projects that I made and listen to all the interviews I listened to, watch all the videos I watched, you'll just know all the info. So let's get into it. Now, I've got to come clean. Honestly, one of the things that I've learned is actually something that I'm in the process of learning right now. And that's why it's top of mind. That's why I want to talk about it first. And honestly, I've been having a lot of internal conflict in my mind with my own content. You see, I have a full-time job. I do freelance work for clients. And so between those two things, I don't really have a ton of time to get out there and create these awesome short films and all these things. And if you watch my previous video, you'll hear me talk more about that. But because of that lack of time, I've felt pretty dissatisfied with what I can create. And when I look at other people and what they're creating, I'm like, dude, there's just no way I have the time to create all those things. And honestly, that whole thought process usually keeps me from actually creating my own things in my own way with the time that I have. So ultimately, the first thing that I want you to know is that comparison is going to kill your creativity. It doesn't matter what situation you're in. If you are comparing your work to someone else's, it's going to keep you from being creative if it's compared in a negative way. But I do think there's a way that you can compare it in a positive way. You see, if I was going to look at someone else's work and try to learn from it or see how I could improve my own work, I think that actually adds value to my own work. And specifically, if you want to look at some movies and recreate those in a way that's kind of comparing your work, because you're comparing your final product to their final product, I honestly think that can be a really, really great way that you actually practice your own filmmaking and cinematography specifically, which brings me to my next point, and that is that it's okay to copy until you find your voice. A great example of this is William H. Baker. He is doing a ton of shot recreations, but then after a while, he actually stopped doing those shot recreations and started just making his own types of shots and putting those out online. So I think he's an incredible filmmaker, and I think that you can reference him and just copy things and different shots until you're able to really understand what it is that you want to create and what you want your stuff to look like. And I don't even think that is a conscious decision you can make, but it just slowly develops over time. The more you make stuff, the more you'll figure that out. Now, I'm going to make this next point really, really quick because it is just a fact that you need to know. If you don't know it, you just need to know it. And everyone talks about a cinematic image and what makes a cinematic image. And truthfully, I think that there is one big thing that does. The Wandering DP talks about it. That's Patrick O'Sullivan. Danny Gewirtz talks about it. Blaine Westrop talks about it. And if you're not doing this, when you start doing it, it's instantly going to change how your images look. And you're going to be like, yeah, this looks cinematic. And that is backlighting. If you don't know about backlighting or upstage lighting, you should go on Wandering DP, watch all of his breakdowns. He references it as the framework. And that's just, it's like a cheat code. If you're not doing that, then your stuff is just not going to look as cinematic as it could. I'm not saying it's the one-stop shop, but I am saying it's the move. Kind of on that same topic, there are elements to working with clients that I have learned aren't as fun. If I'm going to go and I'm going to copy some movie scenes, that's going to be super fun. If I'm going to learn about backlighting, I'm going to just start backlighting everything. That is super fun. But when it comes to working with a client, I find that they don't necessarily often care about all those things. Like, whether your client is a director or a marketing agency, the client has an issue or a problem and they are looking to you for that solution. And that's the next thing and realization that I've learned is that the client is going to be far less focused on the technical side of filmmaking on your end, unless they are also a filmmaker themselves. And they're going to be far more focused on the solution that you're providing. So when you're selling your product, you're selling the video to your services to a client, you're actually going to be selling them the solution. And so how you achieve that solution, or the effectiveness in which you achieve that solution, I think is far more important than how you achieve it. if that makes sense. I think that makes sense. Does that make sense? You could use a bunch of different cameras for a project. You could use a bunch of different lenses for a project. You could use a bunch of different lights for a project. But if the client gets the solution that they've been looking for, which is a high quality ad for their product or company, that's what matters. And if you fail to achieve that, it doesn't matter what, tools you use to do it. It just doesn't matter. That may sound super negative, but I think that when you see client work that way, it actually opens you up to have a much more fulfilling creative work life. Because if you accept that client work is simply solving a problem for the client, then you don't get emotionally attached or creatively attached to said project. I'm not saying that it's not important to care about the project. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I am saying that I do think there are parts of doing client work where you just have to put your own desires and taste aside. Obviously, push back and make sure it looks good, but you have to put a lot of that aside to appease the client. I found myself in this spot where my client work was basically all I was doing, and I was looking to that client work for my creative fulfillment. I just got burnt out and sick and tired of doing work for clients that just was not the way I wanted it to look. And I realized that I was looking to those clients who were just looking for a video, but I was like, I want to make you a movie. And that was just not the move. It was not what they needed. And definitely wasn't what they were paying for. The truth is, if you aren't controlling the final product yourself, there's always going to be someone else that is going to have an opinion or thought for the project. So I would challenge you to find your own creative output and really make a handful of projects a year through that creative output. When I first started feeling these things about client work, I kind of honestly felt like I was alone in the process. If you're also feeling this way, then you know that you're not alone. But on top of us, feeling this way, I've listened to a ton of interviews from filmmakers, specifically on the Wondering DP podcast, who will talk about 25%, if not less, of the actual work that they are doing is what they're actually putting out there. Like your favorite filmmaker and the project that they just posted is not always the project that is, that they're doing all the time and that's making them all the money. But there is a reason that they put that work out there. Like for me, I started making a ton of social media content in February of 2022, posting reels on Instagram, and I was able to grow a decent following. And because a lot of local people saw those videos, saw me educating in the filmmaking space, I started to receive a lot of people reaching out, asking me to make social media content for them. So in turn, kind of, the work that I was producing and putting out there was the work that I started to get hired for. And I think that is really important for you to think about when you try to decide what work you want to put out in the world. Because, at the end of the day, the work that you put out is the work that you're going to get hired for. And so if you're someone who wants to make car commercials, then you probably shouldn't be putting out wedding films. If you're putting the work out and it's good, people are going to want you to do that for them. Think about what you actually want to be doing in the future with filmmaking, and then put stuff out that matches that same vibe. Now, speaking of work that I want to be hired for, recently I shot a short film. I went to Oklahoma, have some friends there, and one of my friends is a really brilliant director, very creative person, probably the most creative person I know. This was my first experience in narrative work as a cinematographer. And on top of that, a lot of my shoots that are my kind of pay the bills work end up being, one-man band kind of vibes. Right? Like that's just kind of how I've been working recently. Sure, I'll bring on one or two people, but most of the time it's just kind of a one-man band vibe. But what I really learned through this short film experience is that working with a team is always better, and specifically working with a team of people who have differing skills than you. I learned the importance of, having a really solid producer on the project, having a really solid wardrobe and production design person on the project. And not only that, but we had an incredible couple guys that helped out with camera, lighting, all these things. But ultimately, I think without that team, that short film would have been a shell of what it actually was. Like, I think it turned out pretty great, and I'm proud of it. And I think if it wasn't for all those people, there's no way that I would be able to be proud of that film. And so don't overlook shooting with a team and bringing on some friends. If you've got a friend that doesn't know anything about filmmaking, but their house looks amazing, and that they can like make a space look good and feel a certain way, bring them on. That's super underrated. I'm just saying. Another element though of this short film was the camera that we used. Now, as you know, I own a Fujifilm X-H2S. Great camera. Low key, been feeling like I maybe should sell it, but I'm like, no, I'm gonna keep it. You know, when you watch the videos and you go through and you hear what people have to say about the camera, and you're really just looking for someone to confirm that you should make a camera decision. Well, everyone's saying that actually the X-H2S is incredible, and compared to the other options that I was looking at, it kind of is the best one. So I think I'm just going to keep it because the YouTube people told me to keep it. On that short film we shot in the summer, we used the Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro. Just want to make sure I got the mouthful of the name right. The one with the internal NDs. And that camera was a freaking workhorse. And then I'm actually about to go shoot another short film in Oklahoma. Same crew, same everybody. It's a primarily nighttime scene. I said, okay, let's do the Sony FX3 because I think it's gonna be perfect, and that 12,800 ISO is gonna make those night scenes perfect. But again, I own the X-H2S. So did I make the wrong decision buying this camera? I don't think so. I think what I'm trying to get across to you that you should think about when it comes to your camera decision is that ultimately the camera is just a tool for the job, and all you're doing is picking a camera that you think is going to be the right tool for the majority of your jobs. I have gone through way too many cameras, so I know the struggle of this, but I'm here with you. I feel you. Another thing that I want to share with you and talk about is just kind of an overall filmmaking thought. I've learned this from a bunch of different interviews, but also from my own experience. There was this one time where I started realizing like I really enjoy problem solving on set. Like it was like there is nothing better than being like, yo, we don't have the tools to make this shot work, so let's figure it out. That is like my absolute favorite thing to do. Then I started seeing that every time I was shooting. And it wasn't that I didn't prepare or whatever. It was just like there were always little problems. Then I started hearing from other filmmakers that they were having the same experience, and they weren't talking about it in a way of like, this is crazy. They were just saying, yeah, we ran into these issues and this is how we solved them and whatever. And this is info is coming from guys that are on like huge films. I mean, I wasn't talking to them. I'm listening to their podcast, obviously. Every filmmaker I know is solving problems. And it really just kind of showed me that all filmmaking really is problem solving. And I think that if you go into filmmaking knowing that you need to be prepared to solve problems, you're going to have a way different experience on set than if you go in hoping that the day goes perfectly and you inevitably run into problems, because you're always going to run into problems. It doesn't matter how much you prepare. There's always going to be some weird issue that you have to solve. But if you want to hear more about how I'm thinking through creating more creative projects, even though I don't have a lot of time to do so, then you should watch the video on screen. But until next time, let's get out there and make better films. I feel like I should do that intro again, like with more energy. Until next time, let's get out there and make better films. Yeah, I always do it the same way. It's like, if I don't do it that way,